The more a utility customer can save, the less money a utility has to spend on a new power plant, on new grid infrastructure, and in this resource-constrained, affordability-focused political atmosphere and economy, customers are more valuable than ever to utilities.
I'm Carolyn Pars, communicator, coach, and host of Just Power, a podcast about creating a clean energy future without leaving anyone behind. Join me as we explore the technologies, policies, and human stories that can make clean energy not just sustainable for our planet, but accessible for everyone. Something is shifting in how the utility industry talks about affordability. It's moving from a customer service issue to a strategic imperative. It's showing up in boardrooms, in rate cases, in regulatory proceedings, in ways that we just haven't seen before. So the question now is whether that shift is producing real change or just better looking plans. Welcome to Just Power. Hi, I'm Carolyn Pars, and today I am welcoming back Ben Nathan. He's the Director of Affordability and Equity at eSource, and I love having him on because he's so smart. So Ben works with utilities across the country on exactly this challenge: how to build strategies that close the gap between struggling customers and the help that exists or even can exist. He's got data, he's got perspective, and he's not afraid to say what is working and what isn't. So welcome back, Ben.
Great to be here, Carolyn. And again, an honor to follow other nationally recognized experts that you've had on this important series focused on energy affordability.
Thank you so much, and you're in good company. So I'd like to start with the scale of the affordability, call it crisis, right, that you're seeing, right, from eSource's perspective. You did a nationwide customer survey, right, in February. And yes, confirming that bills are rising and people are making sacrifices. And many are expected to be disconnected soon, right? That's what I read. Yet, the awareness of availability and projects still remains low. So first of all, tell us about your survey and what that gap says about where the industry actually is right now.
Sure thing. So at eSource, as you mentioned, we work with electric and gas utilities across the United States and Canada. And specifically, I lead a lot of our work around helping them strategize and implement programs and offerings for their customers to help them lower their bills or help them better manage their energy use or costs. So in that capacity, we are constantly fielding surveys of customers across the United States. We typically survey 500 to 1,000 households that are considered low to moderate income, making whether it's $50,000 or $75,000 in their annual household income. We ask them all kinds of questions about their ability to afford their bills, about any kind of financial stresses they're facing, about their interest and awareness in utility programs or offerings that can help them reduce or better manage their energy use and costs. And as you mentioned, we fielded a national survey in February. We really consider it to be a really good annual pulse on customer perspectives, on their pressures, and on the affordability crisis, as you said. And again, we conduct these surveys regularly throughout the year over year. So we're able to see what the trends look like. And I'm sorry to say, but it continues to get harder and harder and more struggle for these customers that we're surveying. So to put some numbers on it, almost 40% of customers that we surveyed, again, just a few months ago, say that their finances in general are worse than they were last year. So
Yeah. Oof,
that's a broader pressure. We're not just talking about utilities or
that's
energy
right.
costs. 60% of the customers that we surveyed reported feeling financial stress paying their utility bills. And we often hear terms like energy insecurity. That's really what we're talking
Yeah.
about there. There's an emotional, mental component to this around stress. 62% of the customers that we surveyed
Mm.
reported having higher utility bills year over year. And we know that energy costs are outpacing inflation now. So it's a particular stressor for these households. A third of customers that we surveyed said that they are cutting back on food and other household necessities to pay their utility bills. Again,
Yikes.
pretty striking example of that energy insecurity. And what you mentioned, almost half of the customers that we surveyed said that they expect to either be disconnected or receive a warning that they're going to be disconnected for non-payment of their utility bills in the next
That's 1 in 2
12 months.
people,
Yep.
right? That's
And
gone up. I mean, right? That we
pretty
heard
shocked.
1 in 3, right?
Yep.
Wow.
So these numbers are going up. The stresses are getting more intense.
Mm.
Um, uh, to no surprise. I mean, if the amount of assistance that utilities are able to offer, if the amount of government assistance that they're able to offer is either flat or declining, and costs are going up, this is what you would expect to happen. These kinds of results.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. So in our show too, we had some voices, right, in Colorado area of real people just saying what's going on. And there was one frustrated person, right, that said that she said the utility programs seem to be stretched thin right now. She called up a utility on the first of the month like she was told to, right? And before 8:30 they said they were out. That's how she said it. I'm not sure what was out, but it was out, that maybe the funds, right? So here's a person that's on top of it, right? And looking for, it's not just someone that's not in the system or is having trouble, which is a whole other issue, right? So, so there's a need, right? And then there's also barriers for them to fill that need. So, what's the most consequential barrier that you see standing between an eligible customer and the help they need? And who's responsible for removing it or making this better in this
Yeah.
really uncertain
Well,
times we're in?
as
Yeah.
much as we hear that customer's stories, and we often also try to capture their voices and interview customers based on their experience beyond just that survey work I mentioned.
Okay.
As as much as we hear that problem that you described of, I would say, an over subscribing to a utility program like bill payment assistance, um,
Right.
across most of the country, we see the opposite problem. A lot of programs that are designed to provide free or steeply discounted affordability opportunities like energy efficiency, weatherization to lower household energy use, or energy assistance, direct bill payment assistance. We see undersubscription across the board. So
Mm.
a lot of
Mm-hmm.
utilities have the opposite problem, and a lot of that is driven by what we see as those barriers that you mentioned. The biggest one being awareness. Um, that survey we conducted in February found
Mm.
that 80% of eligible customers who would have a household income that would qualify them to participate in an energy assistance bill payment assistance program have
Okay.
little or no familiarity whatsoever with the existence of an energy assistance program offered by their utility. That is a shocking lack of
That's a
awareness.
communications problem,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Okay, if you're a utility, you need to call me. I'm just going to say we can help you with that
yeah,
at Mind Over Markets. That's just a shameless plug there because that is customer, responses, awareness, uh, program expansion, right? And letting people know about that. So, Ben, why is that happening?
So what we see is, we try to dive into where that awareness is falling short, with whom, and how to overcome that barrier. One thing that we're seeing, and this is based on different research, including surveys and interviews, what we call, or generally called ethnographic interviews, really trying to understand the experience, the feelings of a customer in terms of their interaction with the utility.
Yeah.
What we see is that the older the customer is, typically, the less aware they are of these kinds of programs, and the less they
Mm.
believe that they're eligible to participate, even if they are
I
eligible.
think that's
So,
that's a combination there, right?
yep,
Yeah, it's almost like not even looking or just giving up on the
yep.
system on some level, right?
So there's a
So,
generational divide that we see over and over again in
okay.
our research. And I think everyone needs to pay attention to this, because when we're thinking about how to serve the next generation of customers, or our existing customer base, those kinds of age considerations really need to be taken into account.
Okay.
And we can design targeted, specific marketing campaigns, messaging,
Right.
maybe the messenger around getting the word out on these programs. And when I say messenger, that's an important factor, because in our research
Yeah.
over and over again, we find that one of the
Someone in the
leading,
community, perhaps, right?
exactly, one of the leading,
Okay.
most trusted sources of information about these kinds of programs and offerings are or family, friends,
Mm,
trusted local community members, whether those are organizations or even individuals. We hear all the time about from our clients that they know specific individuals in the community that can serve as champions for their programs, get the word out, and help drive enrollment. And if those individuals can be compensated for that work, that we see as really industry leading, because that is a valuable relationship that should be appropriately compensated and rewarded for that interfacing and enrollment effort. So these are the kinds of
yeah.
barriers and opportunities we see to overcome them.
Yeah. So, this is an example of years ago. J&J, right? Johnson and Johnson. There was a barrier to reaching pregnant women in certain neighborhoods, that they weren't coming into the doctor's appointment, and there were barriers for them to get there. It was just difficult, right? And so what they did is they went into the neighborhood with a pink van,
Yep.
right? And they did it right there in this mobile van, and they would travel through, and it really, this program really worked. So there's like, can't we do that? And I'm sure it's being done on some level,
I'm
because I think I read something about that, where they actually go in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
maybe have solar panels on the on the car or what
Yeah.
have you, and just be there,
I'm
right?
so glad you brought up another industry, an example, because that's exactly the kind of out of the box thinking we need to do around energy assistance and energy insecurity. To your point, we do see utilities increasingly walking the communities, having vans out there, signing up and enrolling customers, driving awareness, working with local
Yeah.
institutions, working with faith-based institutions as a real hub in the
Right
community
on.
to get the word out on these offerings, and help enroll customers in these transformative programs that they are eligible for and deserve to participate in, and can really transform lives.
Totally. Like, get the pastor to put it in his sermon, her
Yeah.
sermon, right? And make it like this, this is for the benefit of the community. So there's so many different ways you can really, and I love this, right? It's just thinking out of the box,
Yeah.
some innovation beyond what we normally do. Maybe it's inside the bill, right? I've done some of those in myself in my communications. So
Bill, Still an important channel for
Totally. You
getting the
still
word
open your
out,
bill.
but
Right.
yeah, but it needs to be, we need to think of all of the different ways that can be very low cost to effectively reach customers
Right.
and not only drive awareness, which we see as this critical barrier, but to clearly explain and communicate eligibility if depending on what it
Yes.
is for any program. um, it can be very complex and opaque to navigate these programs. The clearer a utility or another assistance provider can provide guidance, can provide eligibility requirements, can explain clearly what this program is, what the
Hmm.
customer is getting out of it, what the utility is getting out of it, the better. Because there's also a lot of perception of scams out there, and that is an unfortunate reality we live in. A lot of utility customers don't trust that this program could help weatherize their home or provide assistance
Mm.
on their bill for free. It's too good to be true, and that's a big
Yeah,
barrier too. So figuring out ways to increase trust, transparency, clarity around these offerings, that could really overcome those barriers significantly.
totally. We are in a trust recession,
Hmm.
right? And privacy is a big deal on so many levels, even more so. So that all this plays into this problem, right? So yeah, it's not an easy one to solve, but it can be solved with um, just some strategy, getting the
Totally.
community involved, the champions inside the community involved. There's many ways to do this because that's going to get worse. And I think when I say worse, it'll get more difficult, especially in the world of AI, and we're going to see more and more machine learning and integration of that in the utility market and beyond. So now, like the real human experience behind all of this is going to
Absolutely.
matter even more.
Absolutely.
So, so here, next question: more utilities, right, are now being charged with building they're building these comprehensive affordability frameworks, right? New KPIs, layered offerings, formal plans. I mean, it's happening in real time. But there's a real difference between seriously making that happen, right? And responding to, I don't know, political pressures along the way or whatever that is, right? So, what does a credible affordability strategy actually look like? And what
That's a
separates the
Yeah.
utilities that are getting it right from those that are maybe not really
That
haven't put that in the forefront?
that's the $1 million question to someone like myself who's working in this space.
Right.
And you know, I think first of all, most states across the United States and most utilities don't have any kind of formal affordability strategy or plan or established goals, KPIs, as you mentioned, key performance indicators, ways to measure
Yeah.
their progress. It's just not for any lack of trying. It's just a new emerging um, concept for a lot of organizations
In
across
this
the
arena
country.
of affordability.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's become
Yeah.
front page news. It is
Yep.
changing elections. It is being taken extremely seriously by the utility industry and utilities.
Okay.
So, first of all, what forms a credible plan is even the existence or movement towards one. And considering that we aren't seeing a lot out there, I would say it would be disingenuous of me to suggest there is a best practice or a best plan we have in mind. But we are seeing a number of utilities that are making real progress towards developing those kinds of holistic plans. And what we mean by holistic is
Okay.
if you know the audience should be aware that utilities and partners that they work with locally, called community action agencies, they offer a wide range of programs, of offerings, of different ways that customers can help reduce their energy bills or better manage their energy use. So there's all these different programs. There could be several, there could be 10. There could be programs that help customers afford or participate in clean energy offerings, or in battery
Mm-hmm.
storage, community solar gardens, for example. There are programs that help customers weatherize their homes and get energy efficient appliances to reduce their energy bills. There are programs that help provide direct bill payment assistance to customers, provide discounts based on their income. Maybe there are payment plans that help customers pay off their unpaid bills over time. There's all these different programs, all these
Mm.
different offerings, and few utilities kind of group them all together under one umbrella, which would help utilities better connect customers to a variety of programs that they may be eligible for that could be stacked on top of one another to help them better reduce or manage their energy use and costs. It would allow them to apply metrics to more holistically look at the affordability challenges in their service territories and see how far have we come. Are we making real meaningful
Right.
impact? Is what we're doing working? By kind of grouping that into one plan or portfolio, that is what we see as an industry best practice. And as utilities are moving towards that, we're certainly looking forward to highlighting those that are doing that increasingly. So
So
that's kind of where we are at now, I would say.
yeah, so this is what I hear you saying is really making a concerted effort around this holistic framework, affordability framework, right? It was often all of this is in customer service or
It's
customer
siloed.
experience,
Yeah,
right? Right? And now there's a whole other level, like it's a sector that is so, and for the next 5 or 10 years, with our transition is going to be even more increasing. I'm thinking maybe a chief affordability officer,
yep,
right? Maybe a new position, something like that. I'll
that may
volunteer for
be.
that one. Maybe you too, right?
We're heading one. New organizational structures, new teams set up to better manage this across these traditionally siloed departments and teams at utilities. That would certainly be something worth highlighting, an impressive
I
movement.
love that. And
Yeah,
that falls under what you just said, right? All those layers, because there's so many customer segments, right? And to
yeah,
put them all in one department, unless you have sub departments, right, is a lot in this energy transition. It just doesn't work because your audience is so audiences are so different and have different needs.
yeah.
So I
And I'll
love
say
that.
that's kind of more of an internal view of what innovation looks like.
Right.
Externally, we love one-stop shops. That is, who doesn't? There's a reason that Walmart is the biggest company on the planet. It is of one place where you can get everything, and customers love that. There's a reason Amazon is so popular. The more we're able to provide a one-stop shop experience for customers who are struggling to afford their energy bills to apply to a wide range of utility or
Yeah,
other programs to help them afford their bills, the better. That would address a significant administrative burden for customers. That's really a barrier to program uptake.
totally.
The more we
You've mentioned
consolidate
that on
this work,
others on other
yeah,
shows. Yeah,
that the
that
more
one
we
single
consolidate
source.
this work, the more
Yeah.
we can offer that one-stop shop experience.
Okay, love it. All right, so let's move on to the topic of the decade, which is data centers, right?
Mhm.
And they're one of the fastest, growing loads on the grid for sure. And they're increasingly being called out for affordability impacts on the communities that are hosting them. So you're collecting examples, I hear, of community affordability agreements that utilities are negotiating. In the Biden era, they were, community benefit agreements, and so here we are. Like, what does a genuinely fair agreement look like? And are any of the utilities out there, getting there in these types of negotiations with the communities that
Yeah.
they are in the territory?
It yeah, so as we're learning more and more about the impacts of local data centers on the local utility rates that we're seeing customers paying, as we're developing a better understanding of the kinds of impacts these large load customers will have, as they're called. Um, uh, we're increasingly seeing utilities enter into more and more robust arrangements, agreements, commitments with those local data centers, uh, not only around how much the data center will pay for its energy, and these are significant energy users, how much
Right.
they'll contribute towards grid upgrades that are required, maybe how much they're generating on site versus taking from local utilities from the grid. We're also seeing, as you mentioned, affordability focused agreements. So these could be contributions by the data center, by the company operating the data center,
Okay.
to energy assistance funds that would go specifically
Mm.
toward qualifying customers in the community, just direct bill payment assistance. It's
Uh-huh.
going towards funds for energy efficiency programs for qualifying customers in those communities to help reduce energy use for those customers. We're seeing workforce development agreements. We're seeing this wide variety of, you call them concessions, commitments to
Yes.
hopefully meaningfully addressing these data centers' impacts in the long run on the community. And given how new this kind of stuff is, we don't know how this will play out in the long run. But we do know, based on national survey data, that customers overwhelmingly, as of this point, do not fully trust that data centers and their operators are going to be paying their fair share in
Right.
the long run, toward compared to the energy that they're going to take and those kinds of impacts that there may be grid wide. So, as you mentioned, we're increasingly collecting examples of more and more agreements and commitments that our utility clients can use to benchmark what maybe they're looking at in their negotiations versus their peers across the country. And that could be in terms of benchmarking the dollar amounts that they're getting from comparable data centers or comparable data center operating companies, or what kinds of things are included in these commitments, like I mentioned, bill payment assistance, energy efficiency funding, workforce and local economic development. So there's
I
all
haven't
kinds of,
heard that. That's
yeah,
fantastic. I heard many, there's water agreements.
yeah,
They're going to, they're gonna provide jobs, right? That are kind of in the build. There's a lot of that, economic benefits, tax benefits, but energy affordability and what you called efficiencies and things
yeah.
like that. That's like sub agreements too, right? Like really kind of drilling down to the the folks that we're talking about that need the help during this time. So I love that, and it's so important to do it right at the negotiation stage at the beginning where you have most leverage, right? So I think it's a really smart move. Right. Back to that affordability department, right?
Yeah, right.
This is part of it all, negotiating
Exactly
with the big
right.
boys when these
Yeah.
sensors come up. So I love that that's happening. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. More than $5.5 billion. You gave me this number,
Yeah.
right? In outstanding customer debt reported in 2025. That's a lot of money. And the customers who need the help outnumber the ones that are, getting it. There's that growing gap that's happening there. Are we approaching a tipping point? And what happens if the industry doesn't get ahead of this?
Yeah. Well, Um, we, as much as myself and my organization, eSource, are looking to do the right thing and help disadvantaged households and struggling customers, at the end of the day, our clients are utilities, and those utilities are businesses.
That's
Um,
right.
and as much as those businesses, our utility customers, want to be the best company for their customers, they are businesses. And where these kind of issues intersect is that these growing customer arrearages, the amount of debt that these utility customers are in, is really starting to hit those utilities' bottom lines. And
Yeah.
therefore, it is in these companies' best interests to help their customers afford their utility bills. So this amount of
Mm.
debt,
Hmm.
the billions, a lot of which grew during COVID when a
Okay.
lot of a disconnection moratorium was in place across most of the country for non-payment. A lot of these debts continue to grow, and they continue to rise. And
Okay.
that debt is impacting utilities' abilities to invest and operate, and keep growing and turn a profit. And this is a significant issue for utilities. The better they can understand what kind of debt they have and be able to compare it to their peers, the better they can be able to manage it and identify ways to help their customers pay down those debts, which again are financially risky for those utilities. So
Yeah.
to do that, we conducted an arrearage benchmark survey late last year. We had
Right.
around 35 utilities participating across the U.S. and Canada. And it gives our utility clients a better idea of how their debt compares to their peers, who's maybe meaningfully drawing it down, the amount of debt that
Hmm.
they're
Okay.
holding by helping their customers pay their bills, and identifying strategies to address that. So again, this is not just an issue of helping our less advantaged neighbors pay their bills. This is really a business imperative to draw down these.
Totally. I mean, we have to have a healthy utility, right? Through this transition, but that's to be important. And this is a big, big piece of it, a big chunk, which also is a motivator to do some, positive things around this. And this survey at least gives them like, how am I stacking up with my peers, right?
Yep.
What did you, what do you think the utilities, like, what did they learn? Right? What was an over, and what surprised you most about it?
Yeah. Well, I think what was interesting is, not only through this survey work, but through highlighting what certain utilities are doing effectively. Um, we've really found increasingly that the amount of time that a customer has accrued debt, so if they haven't paid their
Mhm.
bill in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, that amount of time has decreased at which the customer goes from what we call hopeful to hopeless. So
Okay.
maybe a few years ago, if a customer was unable to pay their utility bill for 3 months, they might stand a chance of being able to pay that back over time through a payment arrangement with their utility. That amount of time has really dropped to 1 or 2 months, at which a customer is very unlikely to be able to get out of debt, get current again
Oh,
on their bill,
wow.
because again of these broader challenges around affordability in this country, around rising energy costs. It is just becoming increasingly perilous for a customer to fall into debt. And as that number comes down, missing a single bill may be um, really, really, really negative. A situation that a customer really has trouble coming back from. And again,
Right.
put the utility in a very difficult circumstance if that's happening kind of more widespread. So
Got it.
we're we
Hmm.
we've been doing some really interesting research into, a customer's abilities to get current and get out of debt, how much time that takes, what kinds of priorities customers have in terms of which bills they're most likely to pay first, whether it's their rent, whether it's car payments, utility payments, healthcare payments. These kinds of insights are
Okay.
really valuable to better understanding customers and identifying ways to help them get out of debt
Mm.
more, or proactively keep them from getting into debt, getting ahead of a crisis, identifying customers who have struggled before and making sure that they are aware of and getting help before they fall into another crisis that perhaps they can't come out of and fall into insurmountable debt to their utility. So the last thing utilities want to see is a customer disconnected for non-payment, and ways to
Yeah.
avoid that and get ahead of it are what everyone wants in this situation.
Right. So for them to getting on that sooner, like way before it goes into two, three, four, and then it gets compounded.
Yep.
That's one thing, right? So solving it or helping solve it right up front, as much as you can. Um, so that's an important distinction. What surprised you most, though, about what do you learn that went, wow,
Yeah. Uh,
here we go.
as you mentioned, the share of customers, when we did this survey, we asked these utilities how many of their customers receive financial assistance currently, and it was so far behind the amount of customers that they had that were currently behind on their bills. So you said it best. There is
Mm.
this remarkable gap between customers who need help and customers who are getting help. Um, that gap was pretty alarming, and
Okay.
it speaks
Mm.
to what we find in our other research around awareness and perception of eligibility.
Mm.
Um, the number, the billions that we're seeing of outstanding debt, a lot of which utilities will have to write off and will not
Yeah.
get back. Pretty shocking numbers. And, for a lot of utilities, this is their reality. This has been their reality for the last 5 or 6 years or so,
Yeah.
again,
Okay.
COVID. Um, but we don't know how sustainable this is. And, we hear about, issues
Mm.
of debt and deficit on a huge scale, like when we think about the national deficit, and economists are warning us this is an unsustainable amount. Um, the U.S. is a powerful global force.
Mm.
Utilities, they're very large, important organizations, but
Totally.
that can shift, that can change. There are acquisitions and defaults and bankruptcies. Things can change dramatically quickly when you've got this amount of debt that we can meaningfully address and bring down through creative strategies.
Okay. And one of those creative strategies that I know you're all behind is about helping customers use less energy, right? We've talked about that, like just energy efficiency, right? Especially with, the transition and data centers and disasters, right? So weatherization, you mentioned it a little bit, demand response. So how do we make a case? Maybe this is the case, which you just said, that this kind of, let's just say, demand side investment is essential infrastructure right now, not just a nice to have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Utilities are increasingly looking at their customers as increasingly valuable energy resources in themselves. The
Mm.
more a utility customer can save, can maybe even produce energy through solar panels, can store energy through batteries. Um, the more that customer can do that, the less money a utility has to spend on a new power plant, on new grid infrastructure, and in this resource and
Mm.
constrained situation, in this affordability focused political atmosphere and economy, customers are more valuable than ever to utilities. So there is a win-win here. That is the premise of
So it's
the
not
whole.
just a one-way street.
Yeah,
This is kind of going right. There's a communication,
absolutely.
even may I say a partnership of some level, right? That happens with their customers.
Yeah, and what we hear a lot of customers who get, let's say, weatherization upgrades in their households report more than anything beyond just the energy they may save and the costs they may save on their bill. They will often lead with, "This made my home so much more comfortable, safe.
Mm,
My quality of life has improved. My kid is not cold and can focus on schoolwork, and I'm not as concerned on that. My health, my asthma has improved that I had before when my home was getting all kinds of dusts and infiltrants into it when it wasn't weatherized. So there are these multitude of benefits
mm.
for customers who participate in these kinds of programs. And of course, that important resource that customers serve to utilities. It's really a win-win.
Okay, that is a win-win. So, thank you, Ben. You have given us a clear picture on how serious this actually is and how it's not getting better sooner unless we really put ch some serious changes, right, that are taking place. So, in closing, what would it actually mean to solve this? And do you believe the industry has the will to get there?
Yeah, well, first of all, um, we there is a federal program, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. This is the single
Right?
largest pot of money that goes towards assisting income qualified customers to pay their energy bills. LIHEAP has been proposed, zeroed out by the Trump administration every year of the first administration and the current administration. There are, thankfully, there are champions in Congress who sustain the funding for that program. But without that lifeline, that federally
Yeah.
provided lifeline that we all pay as American taxpayers towards, um, again, utilities will be in real trouble drawing down those outstanding debt that they're carrying, making sure that their customers are staying current and paying their bills. So we hope and we know that utilities have many champions going to Capitol Hill, lobbying
Mm,
for to maintain or increase funding for the LIHEAP, the federal program.
okay.
I think success would look like increasing amounts of funding for that program, which has pretty much remained flat over the years. And as I heard your past guest, Diana, remark, it is an outdated program. It needs
Right.
more funding. We are all so dependent and reliant on that funding, as well as funding for Medicare and Medicaid and food stamps. This is all systematic. I think I've mentioned this on your show before, but we are
Yeah.
all, I think we're increasingly seeing that we are all part of this interconnected system in which the folks who make the least in our society, who are struggling most, we are reliant on them surviving and thriving in whatever way they can. And a lot of that means us chipping in. And I would hope that utility leaders across the industry
Mm.
really see that as more and more of a business imperative to them, and they will lobby. They have a lot of power. These are large organizations. So success would look like more funding for these programs, more uptake of these programs, fewer barriers to customers enrolling in these programs. And as I mentioned, as we're seeing utilities begin to develop more robust, comprehensive plans, they're going to come up with goals that they're going to seek to meet across their affordability program portfolios. And when they reach those goals, we'll see what success around reaching that goal looks like. But It could mean meaningfully reducing disconnections. When we survey customers, seeing a drop in the amount of customers who report stress and insecurity around their utility bills. We're going to
Mm,
see happier customers who trust their utility, and that's what utilities want to see. We have interviewed many utility customers, and we've seen customers that are unhappy with their utility experience, and we've seen customers that are really happy with their utility service and the way that their utility treated them. And when our utility clients hear those interview clips, uh,
mm,
it's a very different reaction. Everyone, they want their customers to be happy,
yeah.
to like doing business with them. These are every company relies on its customers, so this
Yes.
should really be a win-win. Um, I think utilities should be really invested in making sure that their most struggling customers have a positive experience with them and stay healthy and on top of their bills, so that they can avoid some of these really negative outcomes that we see from energy burden and energy insecurity. So I don't know if that's what success looks like, but I think we're
I
moving
love
in
it.
the
No,
right
we're all
direction.
in this. I always end in the
Yeah,
show, we're all in this together, which I'm not finished yet, but that's
yeah,
what you're saying. That we rely on, everybody relies on. We're
yeah,
actually the human ecosystem, right?
absolutely.
We all rely on each other. And when something falls off really, or struggles really, it has an impact on everyone. We don't live in silos. So yes,
Absolutely.
what you're saying, that if you recognize that, it's a win-win when we help each other, right,
Sure
along the
thing.
way. You know, thank you so much, as always, for joining me. How can people get in touch with you? They want to learn more about you and eSource and all the good work you're doing.
Absolutely. My email is ben_nathan at esource.com, esource.com. Happy to talk. Again, we primarily work with utilities, but anyone working in this diverse and complex industry, we are happy to chat with, to work with in any way, especially around these critical issues of energy affordability and equity. So it has been a pleasure and an honor, as always, to talk with you, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You are truly an advocate. Um, so I think it's fair to say that something is shifting in this industry. That the question I keep coming back to is whether that shift can produce real results. But I'm feeling better when I know people like Ben are doing what he's doing, and the people and others that have been on our show that are willing to say clearly what's not working, what is working, and what it actually takes to close the gap that we're talking about. So Ben, once again, thank you so much for bringing all of that to Just Power today. It's exactly the kind of conversation that this series was meant to be. And I want to thank you for listening. If this series is giving you useful frameworks, real honest data, and the kind of straight talk that you don't always get at industry spaces, the best thing you can do is subscribe. Subscribe to Just Power. And if you're feeling really generous, leave us a review. I would love that. And share this episode with someone in your world who might be working on these challenges or maybe even experiencing some of these challenges. Because the more people who are having this conversation like we did today, the better the chances of actually getting this right. Right? Because we are all in this together. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to Just Power wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really loved it, leave us a review and tell everyone you know about our podcast. It's going to take all of us to create a clean energy future that leaves no one behind.